Okay, good morning, everybody. Um, Glad that you can join us in this morning with a lot of dramatic weather happening in the background. My name is Michelle Scott. I am a member of MPO staff, and welcome everyone to this morning's Boston Region MPO Pilot Transit Working Group meeting. As you're joining, I'm going to turn things over to the MPO's Executive Director, Tegan Tyke, to give a quick welcome. Thanks, Tegan.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everyone. So as Michelle said, welcome. Welcome to our fifth Pilot Transit Working Group meeting. This working group meeting is hosted by the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization, or the Boston Region MPO. And we are a regional body that approves the allocation of all federal transportation planning dollars and capital dollars in the region. As Michelle said, I am Tegan Tyke, and I'm Executive Director to the staff to the Boston Region MPO, which is called the Central Transportation Planning Staff. And hopefully many of you are already familiar with me. I certainly recognize many of you and with Central Transportation Planning Staff, but for new people, we provide planning and technical work in support of a sustainable, a healthy, an equitable, economically viable and robust transportation system in the Boston region, which is 97 cities and towns. We also work pretty extensively with many of our partners in the region, partner agencies, including many of you, RTAs and other transit providers, MBTA and Mass DOT, and of course, all of the local municipalities in our region. So if you'd like to learn more, please visit our frequently asked questions page on our website. We'll have the link in the chat if it's not already. And I think it's just nice to remind everyone each time that we're hosting this forum because the board of the Boston Region MPO, as well as transit providers and stakeholders that we've spoken to, have been interested in supporting kind of more coordination between transit providers, as well as build connections between you all and to the MPO and its work, and also its funding opportunities. So more information about this working group and its genesis and trajectory is also on the MPO website. And again, if we haven't already, we'll share that link in the chat. So while I just say a couple more things, could you all please just take a moment to introduce yourselves in the chat? It's a nice way to see beyond your names and kind of pictures in the participants list. Also just kind of give us your name, your affiliation if you have one, and where you or your transit service is located. And then you all can get a sense of who is here. And then while you're doing that, I'll just say that today we have a special discussion of a topic that several of you have expressed a strong interest in, and that is transit regionalization. So today what we'll do is we'll discuss benefits and challenges experienced in another part of the country when multiple services, a broad range of services were brought together under one single regionalized model. And we have a special guest with us to talk about that experience in transit regionalization. So thank you very much to Richard Farr, the Executive Director of Rabbit Transit and Capital Area Transit, for joining us, and he'll be able to share with us his decades of experience and lessons learned on this topic. So we hope this will give you all some ideas and lessons you can apply to your own situations and how you also work with partner agencies. And then just to kind of be on that special topic, we'll also give you some updates as always about work happening at the MPO and how you can provide feedback into shaping MPO decisions. And we'll share with you some exciting progress on a web-based tool that we've been developing to analyze data about MBTA bus delays. And then finally, we'll recap the Transit Working Group chat sessions. These chats have been going on for, I think, about a month or so, and they've involved smaller groups of working group members in kind of smaller, much more conversational chats around kind of different topics to sort of enhance the coordination that we're working to support you all in beyond these larger meetings. And with that, I think that is a summary of the day. Hopefully you've all been able to put your comments in the chat about who you are and where you're from. I see some more coming. And I'll turn it back over to Michelle Scott, one of our chief transportation planners who supports the Boston MPO, and she is facilitating this meeting. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks very much, Tegan. And I'm looking through the chat here, and it looks like we have a great mix of folks with us today. Folks from the MBTA, regional transit authorities, and transportation management associations in the region, people working in transportation advocacy, folks from councils on aging, as well as Mass DOT. So we're also have a pretty great coverage of the region as well. So I'm excited about that. And thank you all for being here, whether this is your first time or if you've attended meetings in the past. So Tegan gave a pretty quick rundown of the agenda for this morning. This just provides the sequence for you. Following this welcome and some housekeeping details, we'll go into our MPO transit-related activities update. I'll give a recap about the chats Tegan mentioned. There'll be a brief opportunity for transit providers and agencies in the audience if you want to make a quick plug for an announcement or a new activity happening with your service. There'll be a couple minutes to do that. Then we'll turn it over to our headliner presentation about transit regionalization, which Tegan described a little bit, and hear from our guest speaker. MPO staff will then give a brief preview about an interactive tool for analyzing MBTA bus delay, and there'll be some time for public comments and some time describing steps prior to the next meeting. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm just going to run through a quick bit of housekeeping details before we do that. Matt, I think there's a guidance. The slide is a little bit further up in the deck. If you could just jump back to that real quick. So again, today my colleagues Sandy Johnston, Kate White, and Matt Archer will be co-hosting the meeting with me this morning. You may have seen that you joined the meeting on mute. Meeting host will mute and unmute participants for discussion. Please do not mute yourself. This step can require extra time to unmute you because we will have to ask permission. You may have also seen at the start of the meeting that you got a pop-up window about confirmation for the recording. These meetings are recorded and posted to the MPO YouTube page following the meeting today. If you haven't already, please rename yourself with your first and last name and your affiliation. We encourage folks to use the chat box to submit questions and comments, but you can participate also by using the raised hand function, which may be located on your participants button or on your reactions button on your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of the screen. This can vary depending on the version of Zoom that you have. And then we'll then call on participants. If you run into any technical difficulties, you can contact Matt Archer or a member of MPO staff through the chat. You can also reach Matt at marcher@ctps.org or at 857-702-3708. And you'll see a lot of these details repeated on subsequent slides in the deck. In general, we will be prioritizing comments and questions from transit providers during most portions of the meeting, although we'll try to get to everyone as time allows. And again, we do have a section for public comment towards the end of the meeting. The chat is open and we will be checking that for comments and questions. And you may see links mentioned at the various presentations. We'll try to drop things in the chat as we go, but there will also be a follow-up message. So you'll be able to have all those links later. So no need to hurry to write anything down. And with that, we can get started with some of our MPO updates. And first, we'll hear a little bit about progress on the Unified Planning Work Program from Sandy Johnston.
Thanks, Michelle. And good morning to everybody. I'm really excited to hear from Rich, and I'm really happy to see such a wide variety of folks here on this, turning out on this rainy morning, even though we're all on Zoom. So in addition to helping support Michelle in managing the Transit Working Group, one of the things I do is manage a document called the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP. And that's important to talk about right now because we're at the period of time where this annual document that the MPO produces is going to be put out pending an MPO vote for public comment starting on July 15th. And I'm going to put a link in the chat where you can see the draft document has been posted on our MPO meeting calendar. The document is going to be voted on by the MPO on July 15th, and you can see a couple of important links about the document here. Just one second, I'll throw those in the chat as well, and then I will explain a little bit about what the UPWP is about. So Matt, if you could go to the next slide, please. So the UPWP is the document by which the MPO defines how it's going to use the federal planning funds, as Tegan mentioned, that it is allocated each year. One of the biggest things that the UPWP does is fund some major studies that MPO staff conduct, which we call discrete studies. And a few that might be of interest to the group here are listed on the slide. We're doing currently in the current fiscal year a study on the future of the curb, which will be continued next year, and that is looking at curb usage and changing demand for parking and deliveries and bus lanes and bike lanes, all the different things one might use the space on a roadway next to the curb for. We're very excited about that and may well bring it back to chat about with this group at some point. We're also planning to do a study on addressing equity and access in the Blue Hills. We have heard from some of our stakeholders that the Blue Hills Reservation, while geographically proximate to some neighborhoods in Boston, is not accessible for folks who do not have cars, many of whom come from marginalized and vulnerable communities. And we're going to be doing some intensive outreach to understand those issues, and also some service planning study to help support better transit service to the Blue Hills. Through the UPWP, CTPS also provides technical support and analysis to some of our stakeholders and partners. We have a regional service planning technical support program through our transit analysis and planning group, and a community transportation technical assistance program through our traffic analysis and design group that provides support on bicycle and pedestrian and some small roadway projects. And these are programs that are accessible to municipalities. The projects are typically a little bit smaller for smaller scale interventions. And if anyone is interested in any of these things, you should feel free to reach out to me. And my email's on all of the materials for this meeting, and I can put you in touch with the correct people. In addition, the UPWP lists work that CTPS performs on contract to some of our partner agencies, other entities in state government like the MBTA or the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, as well as occasionally other government or other entities. So that is basically everything you need to know about the UPWP in a nutshell. And if anyone has any questions, please do feel free to direct them to me.
Thanks, Sandy. And if it works for folks, we have 2 more updates in this section, and maybe we can take questions as a group at the end of the quick presentations. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kate White, who is a transportation planner and our public outreach coordinator, to talk about upcoming activities around the MPO's public outreach plan.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. I'm here to talk a little bit about our public outreach program and our public outreach plan update. So our public outreach program is the MPO's strategy to include all people across the Boston region in our transportation planning process. The program strives to ensure that all members of the public are given the opportunity to participate and shape decision-making in our projects and studies. And then our public outreach program covers all outreach activities, from those pop-ups at community festivals to big forums or workshops done online or in person, and our digital communications. Next slide, Matt. So I just wanted to provide a brief update. We wanted to update our plan, especially to incorporate more virtual public involvement strategies. As we know, we've kind of really heightened our engagement online through Zoom or other ways. And so the new public outreach plan will really incorporate that, as well as highlight and update a lot of our public outreach principles. We're also pairing this with a new public outreach guidebook. So you're kind of like, how do I get involved? Or I really want to be part of this. Sandy gave some really great updates on how you do that with our studies, but we really wanted to kind of provide something for you that consolidates all that information in an easy and accessible way. It's both available online as well as in print. So these will be coming out in the upcoming months in August and September. And that formal plan will come out with a 45-day public comment period. Please always provide your input. I mean, we really kind of listened to community members across the last couple of years, and in particular during this time when we're less connected in person, to try and find ways to expand and enhance our outreach. So you can always reach out to me at kwhite@ctps.org, which I'm just plugging into the chat now. But we're always interested in your comments, both in the development of these guidelines as well as in the formal document. So keep a lookout, and if you're plugged in on our sign-up list or email sign-up list and on social media, you'll definitely hear about it there, but always feel free to reach out to me. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Kate. And the information we collect, through this public outreach planning process kind of informs, a lot of the events that we do, including meetings like this one. So your input is really helpful on both the UPWP and this effort. And finally, I'll turn it over to Paul Christner to give you a quick update on the Access to Central Business Districts Phase 2 study.
Thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Christner, Manager of Transit Analysis and Planning at CTPS. I'll give you a short update on this project that we're working on right now. Our goal for this project is to develop a guidebook to be released in the fall to assist municipalities thinking about COVID recovery, to meet the COVID recovery goals and the transportation needs and interventions to support those goals for their CBDs. We're currently interviewing municipalities. We have 12 focus municipalities around the region that are based on identification of CBDs in the initial study. And so we're conducting those interviews right now. And if anyone is looking for any more information on the study or you'd like to participate in any way, my contact information is at the bottom of the slide, and I'd be happy to communicate with you about that. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Paul. Does anybody have any questions for Sandy, Kate, or Paul about some of these MPO updates? Not seeing any at the moment. So if not, totally fine. We can move ahead to the next item, which is an update of the chats that we had back in May 2021. Next slide, please, Matt. So the purpose of these transit working group chats, which you may remember that we discussed back in our meeting in March, was to explore a complementary format to these larger quarterly transit working group meetings, which, as you may have seen, follow more of a presentation and question and answer sort of format. There was some interest in finding an effective way to get people to have, more casual conversations and opportunities to share with one another. So we did an experiment to try to pair an additional activity with these larger meetings. Over the course of May, we held 4 one-hour sessions over Zoom, where we invited folks on the transit working group participants list to sign up. These topics related to microtransit, medical and human services transportation, partnerships for ongoing transit recovery, and improving connections and closing gaps in the transit networks. These were designed to have a casual conversational format. Basically, MPO staff developed a list of discussion questions that we posed to the meeting attendees after people had an opportunity to introduce themselves. But people were also free to bring up any items that they had in mind related to the topic. We did limit the number of participants for these to try to keep the groups manageable and give the people attending an opportunity to speak. We did offer priority registration to transit providers, municipalities, and state agencies. Depending on the topic, although signups were posted to the full transit working group meeting list. Ultimately, we had 32 participants across the 4 events. In some cases, we did have folks, transit providers or municipalities or others, register for more than one event. And we did have, for most sessions, more people registered than we were able to accommodate, which was an indicator for us for interest in this kind of activity. So across these meetings, we did have a pretty good variety of agencies and organizations represented. We had folks from the MBTA, several RTAs around the region, transportation management associations, local municipal transportation advisory boards, as well as regionally oriented advisory groups. Municipalities, we had both staff and select board members, organizations working in the human services transportation space, Massachusetts agencies. So a really great variety of people contributing and talking about these topics. Next slide, please. So in these conversations, we found that we were actually able to hit on a pretty diverse range of themes that we were talking about. And I will just quickly drop in the chat some summaries that we have of these discussions that are posted to our MPO meeting calendar. They're very high level, but you can take a look at them to kind of get a flavor of, what are the ideas and resources and topics that people were bringing up under each of these topic areas. We found that, they were a great opportunity for people to share their experiences and give each other advice. We had a great conversation around GATRA, the Greater Attleboro and Taunton Regional Transit Authority's experiences implementing microtransit, demand response service and part of its service area. A lot of discussion about challenges and needs, particularly around funding, but also methods for coordinating, be it about schedules or, coverage in the region or things like that. People had an opportunity to share ideas and solutions, and it was a really great venue for sharing resources and opportunities. We had a discussion in particular during the medical and human services session about the PT1 program, which supports transportation related to mass health. And through this discussion, an advocate who participated mentioned that people could contact their state legislators to help advance a new brokerage contract for the PT1 program. And that was something that people were able to take action on pretty quickly if they wanted to. So we were excited about that. We did have folks take a feedback survey about these. We got an average score of 8.4 out of 10, which was, feel like we did pretty good. People seem to appreciate the diversity of organizations and that they got a chance to talk to people from groups or parts of the region that they didn't get to typically talk to or hear from. They appreciated the focused attendance and also seemed to appreciate the relative spontaneity of the discussions and everyone's willingness to share. These feedback surveys did also provide us with some great feedback about what we can do to structure these going forward, including how we can get people to think about the topic in advance of the session. So we're really grateful both to the people who participated or expressed interest and that completed those feedback surveys for us. Next slide, please. So we wanted to give you just a quick sense of where we might be going with these events in the future. Starting in fall 2021, we plan to continue hosting several chats on various topics between these quarterly transit working group meetings. We're going to take a quick break for the summer, but engage in these more going forward into the fall and end of the year. We'd like to explore some slightly larger group sizes, just because we found that some people, could register, but, weren't able to make it the day of. So, and we think based on the discussions we had, we might be able to add a couple more people and keep them manageable. These chats will continue to be virtual, at least for now. In general, with our transit working group activities, we expect to keep these meetings virtual, at least for the near future, as we're feeling out how to adapt to hybrid meetings and other aspects as we're slowly moving out of the pandemic. We're hoping both to diversify some of the topics that we talked about, both to bring in, other participants on our transit working group list into these discussions, and to touch on some other areas that people were interested in. Things like fare coordination did come up during the sessions that we had, along with sorry, just bringing up the other notes I have about topics, funding opportunities, more coordination around schedules, and talking about specific locations in the region. We'd also have an opportunity to go some deeper on some themes we identified in the sessions that we did have. So even if we have kind of repeat sessions on a theme, we can use those previous discussions to kind of dig deeper into things that people brought up. We expect there also will be some opportunities for tie-ins with future MPO activities. Starting in late summer, early fall, we're going to be kicking off the MPO's next long-range transportation plan. So you'll be hearing from us more formally at these larger meetings about that, but there may also be opportunities to tie in those chats with ways that we can inform the products we'll be producing for that plan. And you may also see this format kind of appear in other MPO activities, kind of tying back to what Kate mentioned as part of the public participation plan. So with that, I'd like to just open it up briefly for any questions, or if you participated in the chat and you want to share anything about your experience, please feel free to do that. Okay, and just checking hands. Okay. The folks are all set there. We can move briefly on to our next topic, which is transit provider items. And we have this as a standing item on these agendas to give members of the group transit providers or state agencies or other organizations an opportunity to bring up any new things happening in their services or programs they want to tell folks about. So I'll just give people a moment to raise hands or put some items in the chat if they want to make other folks aware of them. And I see some folks have been putting some encouraging items about the chat sessions in the chat now, so I appreciate that. Okay. I know we had planned for this item to hear briefly about a new study recently put out by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, a guidebook about implementing improvements to bus infrastructure. Just checking to see if we have Mara Holland here with us yet. I think I can probably say a few words about it, and hopefully she'll join us in a couple minutes. You might have seen, if you're on the Metropolitan Area Planning Council or MAPC's MAPC Matters newsletter, a recent publication titled Get It Rolling, which is a workbook that the Metropolitan Area Planning Council has published on bus improvements. They used Everett as a jumping off point for explaining how the implementation of their shared bus bike lane was kind of a starting point for and a good case study for other things that are now starting to happen in the region around the implementation of bus lanes and transit priority infrastructure and things of that nature. And so they've published a great guidebook that's designed to help municipalities and other stakeholders that are interested in implementing projects like these. I've got the event there in the chat, or excuse me, the link to the guidebook in the chat as a tool that you can use to kind of follow along and figure out how to engage people, how to launch improvements where you are. And one thing that I definitely appreciate as a member of MPO staff is that they do tie in ways that the Boston Region MPO can support the process, both through data support and technical support, but also through potential for funding support. We've talked at previous events about the Community Connections Program, which Sandy manages, as well as work that we're doing through our Transportation Improvement Program, through some of our larger complete streets and major infrastructure projects to support more of this bus priority work. So I hope folks will check that out. Fortunately, we don't have Mara with us yet. I see we got a question from WIG asking about a place for a large regional or state vision integrating land use, transportation, environment, and health. So I do appreciate asking the question. We're working on the development of our next long-range transportation plan, as I mentioned, and we're hoping to bring, as we're developing our needs assessment, which is one of the tools that we use to understand what's happening in the region and what's likely to happen in the region going forward, to think about these various issues. And we're trying to, integrate like health in particular as a tool for exploring some of these issues, more so than we have in previous plans. So we're really excited about that. Oh, we've got Mara here to talk a little bit more about the guidebook, which is exciting. So I'll turn it over quickly to you. I put the link in the chat just to get people going, but if you have more you want to say about it, Mara, that would be great.
Sorry, unmuted now. Hi, everyone. My name is Mara. I'm a transportation planner at MAPC. And we recently released, I think in mid-June, our new workbook called Get It Rolling. And this workbook was a study of 6 recent bus improvement projects that include Broadway on Everett, Broadway in Somerville, Mass Ave in Arlington, Mount Auburn in Cambridge and Watertown, Brighton Ave in Boston, and Washington Street in Rosendale. So we studied these 6 projects and essentially came up with some suggested steps of how to implement bus improvements, specifically the red bus lanes you see, transit signal priority, and other types of bus improvements. And so this guide is not prescriptive. Obviously, every community is very different, has had different levels of community engagement, different levels of public support and political support. So we wrote this guide to try to be as general as possible while still helping people through the process of how to implement a bus lane, other bus improvements. And then we have some resources at the end as well. And so if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. The 3 sort of pieces of the guide are the main workbook. Then we have 6 case studies of those 6 projects that I just talked about. And then there's also a either 2 or 3 page summary sheet. As we know, a lot of people don't have time to read a 50-page document. So we made a quick version for anyone who wants to check that out. And those pieces are all on our website if you'd like to check those out, but also feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions about the guide, and please do share with anyone who you think may be interested. The audience for this is really meant to be anyone who's interested in bus improvement. So if you have a committee that's focused on this, or if you have planners or just advocates who are really interested in this, it's a guide that's meant to be readable by really anyone. It's not super technical. So it should be a pretty good resource, I think, for a wide variety of folks who are interested in bus improvements in the region.
Thanks, Mara. We really appreciate those details. Does anybody have any questions for Mara about the guidebook? Okay, and give a last second if anyone else has anything they want to share before moving on to our next item. And thank you, Mara, again for that information. We've put that out in the chat and we'll add it into our event follow-up email as well.
Michelle, if I can just jump in with one thing.
Sure.
Our partners at MassDOT and Massachusetts DOT put out an RFP this past spring for a statewide long-range transportation plan. And that, while I think that has not yet been awarded, and it is going to be moving forward at some point and will be an opportunity for folks to help develop that vision and potentially that vision of uniting transportation and land use.
Thanks, Sandy. And with that, I'd like to move on to our kind of headliner. I'd like to move on to our headliner presentation for today. Building off of Tegan's introduction at the start of the meeting, we're really excited to spend part of today's meeting discussing transit regionalization and learning more about how this happens outside of the Boston region. It's, we talked a lot about, things happening within the region at the last couple meetings, which has been crucial during the pandemic, but I'm excited to explore a different part of the country and how things happen there. And so this topic around regionalization, as Tegan mentioned, is of interest to folks here. It can help support transit connectivity, make operations more efficient, and address financial needs and issues, although there can be challenges involved in the process. And we hope this discussion will give you some ideas, lessons learned, and things you can take back to working at your organizations and with your partners. And again, we're really grateful to have Richard Farr, who has a ton of experience in this area, to talk with us today. As Tegan mentioned, he is the Executive Director of Rapid Transit and Capital Area Transit, a regional public transportation provider serving the residents of 11 central Pennsylvania counties, providing over 4.5 million trips a year. Farr's leadership has resulted in a number of initiatives, including piloting paratransit software and the Find My Ride PA project for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, as well as the creation of a 501c3 nonprofit known as 3P Ride. He has served on the MATP NEMT advisory committees, the Human Service Transportation Coordination Study, and the Act 89 Shared Ride Pilot Program Advisory Committee. He was named a commissioner on Governor Tom Corbett's Transportation Funding Advisory Commission. He has served as past chairman of the Pennsylvania Public Transportation Association, the Susquehanna Regional Transportation Partnership, York County Metropolitan Planning Organization, and Adams County Metropolitan Planning Organization. And he was most recently appointed to the National Transit Institute's Advisory Board. So again, thank you so much for being here, and we'll turn it over to Richard Farr.
Good morning. Do we need to stop sharing for me to share?
Yes.
Okay.
You can interrupt my sharing, Rich.
Okay. All right. There we go. All right. I see how that works. All right. Are you seeing a slide that says regional transit?
I am not.
Okay. Well, let's try this again. So, all right. Are you seeing two pictures?
Yes, now I am.
Okay, well, that's not the intent. I'm going to try to get to the presentation. And I just tested this morning and it worked. And of course, on live format, you can never get it to work. Hold on one second. There we go. I think I'm good. All right, you should see one screen. Big bus.
Correct. Looking
Okay,
good.
all right, great, thank you. Thank you for helping me work with me as I navigate the technology. I am Richard Farr. I'm the Executive Director of Rapid Transit and Capital Area Transit, and I'm excited to be here. And before I begin, congratulations on all of the work that you've been doing. It's pretty exciting. I have a list of notes of stuff that I've taken away from your conversation this morning, so I always appreciate that. Today, I'm just going to share a little bit of our story here in Central Pennsylvania and how we have advanced regionalization and what regionalization means to us. So, why regionalization? And so, I have a firm belief that only elected officials and government officials care about municipal boundaries. Land use and transportation patterns, they grow and change and move throughout the region regardless of municipal boundaries. And typically transit operates within a municipal boundary, but our consumers don't. And so how can we better serve folks across those lines? And we think we're doing a better job of that through this regionalization. I'll talk a little more about that as I go through the presentation. I think regionalization can take on, all kinds of different shapes. When you look up the definition of it, it's you're creating subcomponents of a bigger, whatever that looks like. It could be coordination, it could be full mergers. For us, we've been taking the approach of really merging systems together, creating one. And so if you look at the bottom of this slide here, you'll see a term called systemness. I've recently been appointed to a local healthcare system board of directors. And if anybody wants to talk about how things are regionalizing, it's healthcare systems. And so they really are leading the way on how this can work. And they use this term systemness, really taking a very complex system and giving it the appearance of one. And that's really what we're trying to do here at Rapid Transit, is take all these moving pieces and try to make it look like and function as one. And so we've had a lot of benefit with that. And you're able to gain resources if you kind of approach it this way, but also you're able to maintain some of the unique characteristics of all of those different areas. And again, I'll share a little bit more about that as I move forward. So a little bit about our history. We were incorporated in 1974 as the York Area Transportation Authority. And over time, in the early days, there were some other mergers, how local match. So, we merged with the Shared Ride or the Paratransit program. And just a little background on that, here in Pennsylvania, we're very fortunate that the lottery program supports the Paratransit program. And so essentially, we have statewide ADA service. If you're over the age of 65 or if you have a disability, we can provide ADA-like service statewide, not just along the fixed route corridor, but throughout the entire service area. And so it's a pretty robust program in Pennsylvania, our paratransit program. And so, in 1990, the fixed route program and the shared ride program combined. It was a nonprofit organization and a transit authority, and they merged. And so in 1996, we formed a new transit system with Adams County. And that really came out of necessity. Some of our mergers throughout the time, up until current time, was some was out of necessity. A director left, they were in financial crisis, or they simply wanted better service for their folks. And I'll talk more about all that. Kind of jumping forward to 2007, our major funding source at the state level was passed, Act 44 of 2007. And in it, it required PennDOT to do a human service transportation coordination study. And so PennDOT, along with the Department of Human Services and Department of Aging and the Department of Health, launched this coordination study. And, it was a pretty big study, boiling it down to, we work in silos. If we can remove the silos, and we believe that transit systems can work better together, we can improve service. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to determine, that can be held true. Kind of seeing the writing on the walls, we began working with our neighbors better, thinking I'm always about steering the ship versus being steered. And so we really began working closely with all of our partners and moving more towards a coordinated system. In 2011, we formally merged with Adams County Transit System, and we became the coordinator for Northumberland County. Northumberland County was a county operated system. The county commissioners were struggling to make it work financially. They called PennDOT in early June and said, July 1, we're out of the transportation business. So PennDOT reached out to us, and in 16 days, we took over a county transportation department and merged it in with our operation. I don't recommend doing a merger in 16 days. It was a little rocky, but we were successful, and they've been part of us ever since. So then, the timeline, we began adding counties, and I think I'll jump to the next slide that better demonstrates what I'm talking about. So this is the state of Pennsylvania. The gray areas is our current Rapid Transit's footprint. That's truly my employer. Capital Area Transit is the fixed route system in the state capital, Dauphin County, and they also provide fixed route service in Cumberland County. And so really, I think success breeds success. And so as we began Northumberland County, you can see York County's here. This is my home base. We merged with Adams County. Northumberland County was the first county to join. It's not even contiguous. And so when we moved into Northumberland County and really stabilized the program, and the community really responded well to us, the neighboring counties in the area began to take notice, and the county commissioners began having conversations with us and invited us in to have, to really talk about what we're doing and how it could be better. Cumberland County was the next county to join us. They had a county shared ride program. The fixed route was operated by the transit system, but the shared ride program by the county. And so we merged them in, and then one after another they joined to create the 10 county system. 3 years ago, Capital Area Transit found themselves in a financial mess. They had about a 2.3 million unfunded deficit and was really struggling to figure out how to get out of it. We have demonstrated about $1.5 million savings a year, regionalizing all of those shared ride programs. And so the CAP board was interested in what we could do together to pull them out of the hole, make them fiscally sound, and really create a sustainable system. And so we've been managing them since 2018, and we just submitted to the Secretary of State our articles of incorporation to form a new transit authority. It's going to be the Susquehanna Regional Transportation Authority, and it will create a new transit system in this entire footprint in the center of Pennsylvania. You'll notice Indiana County out here is highlighted in yellow. We manage their non-emergency medical transportation program. The county reached out to us and said they didn't want to do it anymore, and we said yes, because we believe that it should be part of a coordinated system. They could have went to a private broker, but then they would have operated a transit system and a non-emergency medical transportation program, and they wouldn't have been tied together. We're the administrator, but every trip is delivered by the local transit system. We do not provide any direct transportation. We contract with the transit system in Indiana County to really ensure that coordinated system works well. In Pennsylvania, I talked about the lottery program, but we also have a lot of other human service transportation programs. The shared ride vehicle could have 10 people on it at one time with 10 different funding sources. And our typical, and I'm not speaking of, SEPTA, Philadelphia, or maybe Port Authority, Pittsburgh, but the rest of the state, an average shared ride trip is about $23. So when you think about an ADA trip in areas of how much, some transit systems are paying per trip, that is a very low cost when in the average trip length in the state is somewhere around 23 miles, because it's very rural when you get up the center of the state. And so, it's a very low cost, but very effective, because we fully use that coordinated program, one van, multiple funding sources, and now in our footprint, crossing county lines. Our policy is that whatever county you live in any contiguous county is your service area. And so we will take you anywhere within your county and to any adjacent county. And sometimes we do place some rules around the leaving county. Maybe it's 10 to 2 because it's shared ride. Or it depends on, in Lebanon is the Lebanon VA hospital. And so, we have special parameters about taking folks to Lebanon. So even if you're in Franklin County, we will go there, because even though it's not contiguous, it's the only facility of that nature. So here is a slide that shows our fixed route program. So the rest of the system is shared ride, but the blue lines are the Capital Area Transit System. The red lines are Rapid Transit's service area. And they do connect at a couple different points. The CAT system used to have a park and ride that came down about here. And these buses, the two buses would follow each other up the road and follow each other back down the road, servicing the same large park and ride. And so CAT, having a financial concern, we were able to save them about $100,000 a year by just eliminating that, but no one really lost service because the Rapid Transit bus served the same route. So there was one sort of low-hanging fruit example of how regionalization saved money. We were able to, under normal circumstances, we would have taken that money and deployed it someplace else. At CAT, we needed to put it towards the deficit. So by working together, we continued to serve the local residents, no impact to them, but then save the transit system about $100,000 a year. So good stuff there. And just as a side note, the slides that I'm going to show, I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. This is the slide deck that I showed to all the local elected officials as we moved our way through the conversation about why regionalization and consolidation works well. So just so you know who the audience was, in addition to you folks, I used it for other purposes. So, I talked often about the benefits of regionalization, certainly economic development. We are seeing more and more large employers move into the area seeking transportation. Certainly with COVID, I've never been called more in the last year about how can I get people to work. I'm not sure what it looks like in Massachusetts, but in Pennsylvania, I think we have 1.4 jobs for every resident. And so it is, the labor market is very tight, and they're all trying to compete to provide some sort of leg up over their partner. And you know what, transportation can be one of those. If you can connect people effectively, that employer can be successful, and many of them have caught on to that's a good thing. Improved employment opportunities. I kind of referenced that already, but in Pennsylvania, the mental health and intellectual disability program is beginning to decentralize. We used to take folks just to sheltered workshops, and they're trying to get them mainstream. The issue that we have when they mainstream them is it's not your typical sheltered workshop hours of 8 to 4. It's typically 4:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the local Wendy's. And so, it's a whole different service delivery philosophy that we're trying to figure out how we can do. And we've discovered, again, working cooperatively with more resources, we've been more successful in meeting those demands. I referenced veterans transportation, and Michelle noted that we formed a nonprofit organization, and I failed to update my bio. We've recently rebranded that to Rabbit Cares. And so we've been successful in finding non-traditional transportation funding sources, foundation money, to connect veterans to jobs and to the VA hospital. They don't qualify for the traditional state programs, but again, working together in that coordinated system, we're able to deliver more trips at a more effective cost. So looking at the improved transit operations, CAT was facing a 40% service reduction. September 9th, we implemented 3% service reduction to balance the budget. We've been successful looking at our operations, and I have folks who, even before the merger, because that doesn't happen until October, we think, I have staff who are hired by one or the other transit system that are really dedicated to their specialty for both systems already. And so, civil rights officers, human resource directors, those folks they may be an employee of CAT, but they also oversee rapid transit. And we've already moved in that direction. So eliminating a lot of the duplication. No one has lost a job through any of these mergers. I think that's always important. People get very excited about what does that mean. No one's lost a job. Now, through attrition, we may have not replaced positions. We still have the same number of positions for the most part, but we've been able to reallocate them and hire people with in a more specialized area. I often refer to ourselves as that we're a compliance agency that sometimes provides transportation, right? So we all live that world. It's very difficult. It becomes, and the bigger you are, as we merge with CAT, we're going to go over all the thresholds for all the Title VI and environmental justice analysis. And separately, we don't meet those. Together, we will. And so we've already employed somebody who can help us make sure that we're always compliant in that area. It's just one example. Things like improved access to customer service. Together, we have a call center that was 7 to 7. And historically, most of these smaller transit systems had more traditional, what I call banking hours, 8 to 4. And so now folks can make reservations, check on trips, whatever, for a much larger period of time. Shared robust intelligent transportation and technology. We've together, again, sharing resources. We've done some things that we think are pretty cool. Maybe other people are already doing it, but we've connected the caller ID. We use EcoLane as our software for our paratransit. So when the call comes in, it searches the database by the caller ID, automatically populates the client files, so the customer service rep doesn't have to search for them. So we're using a lot of technology like that to make our staff more efficient, and it's really changing the feel of the system. That the quality that we're giving back to the consumer is really improving. The feedback has been very positive, and again, we're buying it once and we're deploying it across 11 counties versus needing to buy it 11 times. And so that makes PennDOT pretty happy. Improved, again, continuing on the improved transit operation. I'll jump to the last bullet here, a shared seasoned executive director. I kind of chuckle when I put that on there because I'm talking about me. But the reality is that I referenced how difficult transit's becoming to manage, and the ability for us to hire a little higher wages. We're able to attract folks who are, maybe better suited to tomorrow's transportation systems, or we've given opportunities for current staff to grow in those positions with extra training. So it allows us to be, when you're a smaller system, you have to wear many hats. Some of our transit managers in the county departments would go change the tire on the bus and then go pick up consumers and then file a grant application all in the same day. You don't have the ability to become specialized in anything, and we've been able to do that, and I think that has worked really well for us. Multiple county perspective for planning service. So we have 5 MPOs we work with, but we have dedicated staff now who attends all the MPO meetings, and so we're able to begin to sort of bridge the gap between the MPO planning process, which is kind of unique and interesting, and that seems to be working well. We are attempting to update our human service transit coordinated plan over a 5 MPO system. And so we're going to have one plan with all 5 MPOs working together. And so we'll see how that turns out. That's a pretty big effort, but I think, recognizing again, people don't stop at the county line. We have to have an understanding of how people move through the region. And, I'm going to quickly jump back to the map, the metropolitan area really is right here. So anyone who needs any big services, major healthcare systems, whatever it may be, they're traveling from these outlying counties into that area. And so we're going to begin to hopefully better address that as we move forward through that plan. I talked about healthcare already. We're finding that folks are needing to go 2 or 3 counties to the mothership of the healthcare system. So a system in York has purchased a healthcare system 3 counties away. Those folks 3 counties away now need to come back to York for all of its major testing or surgeries. And so we're finding where people used to travel down the road, now we're taking them 3 counties away for medical needs. It's just the nature of how healthcare is working, and we're able to remove the county lines. In the shared ride program, whatever the closest vehicle is the vehicle that picks up that person and takes them. So if we have a vehicle that drives a county away, it doesn't sit there anymore at the hospital waiting for the person to go home. They're providing local service there the whole time. And when the person's ready to go home, they go back and pick them up and take them home. So that, again, is a cost savings, makes us more productive, and provides better service to the area, because we really have more drivers in those urban areas running throughout the day. Connectivity to higher education. We have, it's the Harrisburg Area Community College, but they have campuses throughout the region. And, with student enrollment dropping, we're finding students now need to go back to the main campus at some point during their education from these satellites to take classes that aren't being offered. And so we've been able to connect those dots for those individuals. And we work closely with emergency management, with evacuations and shelters for first responders, something that the rural areas never did. And so that's been a great added benefit. Again, just sharing those resources. So I want to check my time. Okay. So, what's been good and bad about this? I hold a principle that related to transit regionalization, that we are more alike than we are different. So, while the county commissioners may have decided that they would like to regionalize with us, the management team of that transit system, I can assure you, we're not necessarily jumping up and down with glee and welcoming us with open arms. And so one of the largest counties that merged in with us was Cumberland County. And that manager, she's been, and when people came, we assumed all their years of service. So she's she's been in public transportation for 32 years. So she really knows what she's doing. But she was the one every step of the way who kept saying, well, we do this differently. Well, no, we do that too. We pick people up, we drop them off. It's the same kind of process. And so oftentimes we would hear, the justification of why this won't work because we're different. And now it's been 5 years since they've been with us. And she just sent me a text. It was this week that we had our 5-year anniversary. And she says, I can't believe how well this has gone. I couldn't imagine it being any better. My life is so much better improved. I have a team of people. Before I had to go to the county commissioners, they don't understand what we do. Now I have this large team that I can go to for support. It's just been very positive. But again, I think as transit systems, we are more alike than we are different. And that principle is held true through our entire process. Regionalization challenges. I think the single biggest challenge we encountered through our process, through all these mergers, is fear. There's this fear from elected officials they're going to lose control. There's fear that people are going to lose their job. There's fear that people won't get picked up and taken where they need to be. And none of that has been true. That's how we are as people, and we have to really work through that. After the first county, Northumberland, joined, I quickly recognized how people feel about that, and we were very mindful every step of the way to reassure folks we do have agreements with all the counties that put those kind of assurances in place. Reporting requirements. We even have some that have the clause that we won't terminate any of the positions for 3 years. We didn't have to. We didn't want to anyways. So that's really the big piece of it. There were some politics involved. The fear from the elected officials is that somebody in York won't understand our specific region. So York, they see York as the city. It has 45,000 people. It's not a huge city, but when you go to a very rural area where a borough may have 400 residents, it looks really big. And so the city's coming in and taking over. And so we reassured them through the process that we still have all the depots throughout the region. We didn't, you still have to have buses stationed there. The folks who were there are going to continue to be there. And so we were able to work through a lot of those. For me, being responsive to elected officials is number one job. If I get an email, we get any contact in this building from an elected official in those regions, it is I who will respond, and my staff needs to come running to my office with that correspondence because we are going to be on it. We're going to respond immediately. And we've done that. And so I hear them talk about our praises of how responsive we are. And sometimes the answer they're hoping to get isn't the answer I give them, but I do it in a very timely fashion. So they know we're sincere about it, that, and provide lots of justifications. So many of the counties that we absorbed were really small. The smallest county in Pennsylvania was one of them. And they really struggled with a small team to provide, I don't know if we're really providing robust transportation now, but because there's always more needs than we have resources. But by sharing those, we've been able to extend their hours. They had service from 9 to 3. Now they have service from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And so we've been able to share that overhead, reduce their operating costs at the local level, and able to take those resources and reinvest it into the drivers to offer more time. And so I think that's been a really positive feature of that. Again, continuing to reassure that the jobs will be here, managing rumors, stay ahead of it. We learned that if you don't tell the story, they'll make up their own. And so it's better to be ahead of that. We created a very robust, and if anybody ever wants this stuff, Michelle or Sandy, you can send out my email address and people can email me. I'll be glad to share with anybody our checklist. But it is really just, we broke it down by administration, operations, human resources, maintenance, and it's just, and we kept building it. And so we would sit down with that team wherever we were going and walk through that checklist and have conversations and get documentation and share resources and really was sincere about all boats rising. If they had a practice that was far better than ours, that became our practice. It wasn't the rabbit way. We're not coming in, and it really was a sincere partnership. And so we think, that was part of our benefit, or one of the things that made us successful. Almost 100% of the back office systems are merged currently. And really, even with CAT, we haven't merged with them yet, but working with them for 3 years, we have merged the back end. There's one payroll system, one finance system, one AVL system, we've already started doing all of that work. Maintenance software has been merged into one. So all those functions on the back end remain, or have become sort of single on the to really help us manage that system. There are some changes or differences in policy. So in operations, we set some broad definitions of what we're hoping to achieve, and this is the direction we want to go. But we recognize that in this county, they do something for this population that's a little different than the rest. And we didn't want to come in and say, nope, that doesn't work, because that's not how we deliver service. So we tried to allow those counties to have some unique features, just again, to preserve that uniqueness. And so I can't say that doesn't come with challenges, because I have to try to remember when I'm talking to that county that we actually do that, because we only do it there and nowhere else. So there are some challenges to that, but we think that's an important thing to preserve as we move forward. We do have, in our paratransit scheduling, we did regionalize that to 2 areas. So there's 5 counties, we call it north and south. There's 5 counties in the north. There's a centralized scheduling office that schedules all the paratransit trips in one location, and the same way with the 5 counties in the south. So we did merge that. That has been very successful. We have found great efficiencies, because again, we have folks, that's all they do now, and they look at how we can connect people across county lines. Eagle Lane does probably 85% of the scheduling work, to be honest. It's a pretty good program, but there are those human aspects that you still have to touch. And again, I referenced the closest driver, shared resources. We have just merged our advisory groups. They will have their first meeting, I think, on the 13th. It's coming up soon. So I'm anxious to see how that goes. We struggle sometimes with participation. You have a core group of people who show up all the time in both systems, CAT and Rabbit. Now we'll hopefully have a larger group. And interestingly enough, these folks all know themselves, even though they're 4 counties apart. I was really worried about the dynamics, but they already interact at different state events, so they already kind of know each other. So I'm really anxious to see how that will help us improve our service. I talked about the cost savings. It's real. We've seen cost savings through saving on the back end. Again, no staff has been reduced, only through attrition. Communication is important to the riders. Again, drivers, if they're nervous, they have lots of time on board if they're traveling 23 miles on an average trip to talk about their concerns to the passenger. And so we want to make sure that we're not only communicating to the employees, but we're communicating to the public what's going on. So we do, we started Facebook because of this. We probably, I don't know if we'd be on social media or not, but we got on social media because of that, because it was the easiest way to reach them. We've done seed drops, outreaches, newsletters, direct mail pieces, lots of partnership with different areas and aging senior centers, healthcare systems, really a lot of conversations that we wouldn't normally have had, but all very, very important to the process. So I showed the slide before that had most of this gray. The new transit system that we're forming is a transit system of 5 municipal partners. It's Dauphin, Cumberland, Adams, and York, and the city of Harrisburg. They are the local match contributors. And so it was determined that there's no representation without taxation. So they're the only ones that contribute. The rest of the program is all state funded. There's no local match requirements for the shared ride program in Pennsylvania. So they don't have board representation, but we do have the management agreements where we give reports and required to come meet with them. We still make sure they're involved in the process so they feel included. But that is the new transit system. Just looking here at my notes to see what else is here. As we So I mentioned not every county has board representation, so only those who provide local match. As we move forward, historically branding was easy. In those rural counties, most of the vans were white. They didn't really have brand recognition. They just didn't have dollars for that kind of marketing. So we really brought, at Rapid Transit, we brand everything. Something has to hop, or something, like everything at Rapid Transit has some sort of unique marketing aspect. And so we were able to brand the rest of the system pretty well. As we move into CAT, which is a urban fixed route system, the joke is which animal is going to survive. We don't know. The first board meeting will probably be in September, and that's a conversation that the board's going to have is, do we create a single system? Do we keep two brands? I want one brand. I want one call center, one ride guide, one website, one. Managing two is one too many. So, that'll be the staff's perspective, but we'll see. We have across that, but this will be the first time in marketing and branding that we're going to cross a threshold that's a little different, because CAT, again, has pretty good brand recognition. I wouldn't say they have a good reputation. And that's a whole nother hour and a half presentation. But when I started at CAT in February of 18, in February, they canceled 118 pieces of work because employees didn't show up. And so that doesn't make you very popular if you're waiting at the corner to go to work and the bus doesn't show up, that you have to wait for the next one. And so, and especially when you have half-hour headways at your biggest route. So we have significantly made improvements there. I think last month we may have had 2 canceled routes. And so we're moving in the right direction. But I think the Rapid Transit brand is better, but again, we'll see how that all goes. Yep, so all right. So talk a little bit about the biggest concern I had was governance. How do you take 2 systems, bring them together, and make sure that everybody is comfortable with what the governance model is? Because this is really where the rubber meets the road. All the other stuff I talked to is great. They want to know who's representing them and how much power they have at that level. And so we looked at all kinds of factors, but these were the 4 that we settled on. So population, local match contribution, average monthly fixed route miles, and average monthly ridership. And so we just simply plotted that out and basically reflected the votes based on that information. So pretty straightforward, but this was the sticking point when I went to the 5 municipal partners. This is where I had to spend the most time. So you really, if you want to move in this direction, this is where you'll spend most of your time, is trying to figure out how do you handle the governance. At the end, we were successful, obviously, because we did file our articles of incorporation, and we hope to hear by the end of this month that that's been approved and we can begin moving forward. These are the questions that we got from our stakeholders. Will funding in one system be spent in the other? No. FTA gives us funds by UZA, and we will make sure those UZA funds for fixed routes stay within that UZA. We will not spread that across. Will drivers be sent from one area to the other? Those of you on the call in transit will understand 13C, most likely. And our 13C agreement at CAT is, well, the union was very much in charge when that was written. So if we transplant a driver, we have to buy their house, buy them a new house, and cover all of their all their moving costs for like 3 years. So it's not something we will ever do, and why would you want to anyways? You have a home base, the vehicles, the biggest expense is paid driver hours. So we're not going to move people away from the base, but that is one of the concerns that we heard all the time. You're going to make drivers go someplace else. Now in shared ride, they may drive into the city and then work there, but they still will start and end their day at their home base. And will the regionalizations affect the CBAs? Maybe I should, I don't have a slide on this, and maybe I should. So I have the Central Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, the Capital Area Transit Authority. Those 2 authorities will continue to be in existence forever. Even though we're creating a new authority. Those 2 authorities are going to continue to employ collective bargaining employees. The rest of the counties are not organized, only the urban fixed-route systems are organized. And so to prevent any 13C issues, those two transit systems or authorities will continue to exist, employ the drivers and mechanics who are covered under the CBA. All the other employees will go to the new transit authority, and the board who serves at the lower levels jointly make the board of the new system, right? So the only time they'll take action at the lower levels is to approve the collective bargaining agreements. Both transit authorities will pass resolutions surrendering all rights to the new board. So they'll exist only to approve collective bargaining agreements. And then the rest of the decision-making will be at the higher level. And we did that to avoid the 13C requirements. It was just, we found it to be easier. So with that, I'm 5 minutes over. So we do have some time, I believe, right, Michelle, for conversations. So I don't know if there are questions.
Thank you so much for that wealth of information and really that kind of exciting story about how, you know, transportation has evolved with a lot of facilitation work that you've done over time. So I encourage folks to put questions in the chat, or if you would like to raise your hand, MPO staff will call on you.
So there is a question in the chat of how we interface with Center County. So it is, we are Penn State. That's the home of Penn State University. We don't necessarily interact with them. We have had a few opportunities where we will pick up shared ride trips at the county line. So Center County will bring folks to the county line. We will pick them up and then take them. There's a large healthcare system, Geisinger healthcare system, that's in 2 counties over. And so we have made some connections with them. Yeah, I ride the Center County, I ride CATA's bus at game days. That might be my closest interaction to Center County, is riding their bus on Penn State game day.
Well, thank
Yes.
you, Rich.
So there's another, go ahead, I'm sorry. There's a question in the chat, I'll get to you. Go ahead, I think it was Kate.
Yeah, I was going to read it out for everyone so they can hear. Compliment of a great presentation. And the question is, could you clarify the role of the counties in Pennsylvania providing public transit, senior shared ride, and Medicaid transportation? And do all counties allow passengers using multiple funding streams to ride in the same vehicle? Which I think you touched on a little bit, but could you clarify all that information?
Yes, so about, I guess, 2 years ago, I'll share the dark secrets of Pennsylvania. So we, through the efforts of some lobbyists, there was language placed in the fiscal code for the year with the budget that all non-emergency medical transportation needs to be brokered. And so we were losing every transit system. About 30% of what we do is Medicaid transportation. And so through incredible efforts of advocacy, we were able to stop that process from occurring. And why is that important? So the example that we used often was, if you have a vehicle with 3 passengers, right? And so my cost is, I should have this in front of me, so don't hold me to my math. So say my cost is, $40 an hour. And so if I have 3 people on the vehicle, and the fare needs to be 40 divided by 3, right? So, but if I have 2 people left on my vehicle, it's still $40 an hour. Now I need my fare structure, because the fares have to cover the cost on the shared ride program. So it needs to be 40 divided by 2. Well, if you're a consumer and you have to pay 15% of the cost, because that's what they have to on the laundry program, do you want to pay 15% of divided by 3 or divided by 2? And so in Pennsylvania, in most counties, it is a fully coordinated system. PennDOT sets our fare structure on the shared ride program based on our expenses. much like what is your operating cost? How many trips are you anticipating? That's your fare structure. And we do it by mileage. So we typically do it in, I call it 10-mile buckets. So there's a fare from 0 to 9, 10 to 19. And so no matter what program is buying service, it uses the same fare structure and everybody shares that trip. And so literally 10 would probably be excessive, but to say there's 6 individuals on there with all different funding sources is a reality that happens regularly. So it's very important. That's why I think our costs are down, and that's why we're able to provide really county-wide, system-wide shared ride service from 6 to 6 in very rural areas and really be pretty successful. Before COVID, we were on track to do, my fixed route program in York does 1.4 million trips a year in a populated area of, we're over 200,000, but we're on track to do over 500,000 shared ride trips in the rural areas. So it's a very big program, but we're able to be successful because of the coordination. Hopefully I answered that question.
No, thank you so much. So I have some more questions for you, but if anyone has any, raise your hand or add things to the chat, I'll make sure to get them to Rich as well. So my question to you, Rich, is you talked about the outreach you did to really connect with different communities across your multi-county coverage area. Could you talk a little bit about how the customers responded as these services were regionalized or consolidated? And did you find that they were convincing, or did you find that you were convincing people to start using transit? And what did you learn about how to keep customers informed about the changes to the system?
Yeah, so, in shared ride, oftentimes the same driver runs the same route. And so you have dialysis folks who ride 3 days a week. They become, friendly. Like that's my driver, that's my passenger. And so many riders were very concerned that they would lose their service, they would lose their driver. And so we did direct mails. We have an IVR system. We would send out robocalls, encouraging them to look at our website for more information, or if they want, we can mail you stuff. So we really went above and beyond to communicate with the riders. Maybe 20% of them required that extra communication. It wasn't everybody. Some people, they just don't care. They just went through their day. And so, but yeah, we spent a lot of time doing hand holding just to reassure them. But again, we also went to sort of the caseworkers of the community and made sure they understand what we're doing. So the people who are riding our bus are probably also talking to them. And so if they share concerns about transportation, we made sure, because our number one referral is caseworkers to the shared ride program. The social worker somewhere is referring them to us. So we went to that population, had a conversation with them to make sure that was good. But there are other sort of side benefits that came from those conversations. I began to learn all about social determinants of care and build great relationships with the healthcare systems. And that's, again, another hour presentation, but we've created our own public transit broker system for Geisinger. So there are 6 transit systems working together. We take their trips here in York and we book them in their EcoLane software in their counties to provide trips directly for that healthcare system. That all came from the conversations from the regionalization. It's funny, if you open your mind and see where things can go, good things can happen.
That's really cool. Thank you, Rich. So I see Susan Barrett with your hand raised. Susan, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Hi, thank you. This has been really interesting and exciting. I'm glad you're here. Apologize, when I'm about to ask, maybe someone asked it already. Our phones have been a little bit busy, so I hope I didn't miss anything. A few things. I was curious what transportation services the counties were generally operating before you merged. And I'm just making an assumption here, which I could be wrong. It sounds like in Pennsylvania, the governance is mostly at a county level. Looks like you have over 60 counties. We have over 300 towns, so it feels like that might complicate things a bit more here. So I was curious what you had, first of all, and then I had a couple more questions.
So state code requires that the county appoints a coordinator of service. So one of the coordinators of service was a taxi system. There was nobody else in this county. And so for 20 years, the taxi system was the public shared ride provider. Not the best model, all kinds of problems. So it is county based for the shared ride program. For fixed route, it could be a borough, town, city, it could be county, it could be multiple counties, multiple townships. So yeah, I mean, York County alone has 72 municipalities. So we're both commonwealths. We know how that works. So there are challenges to that. But I try to the best of our ability to take it to the county level where we could. And so, but I still ended up having, the city of Harrisburg as one of the municipal partners. So I have, 4 counties in the city. So there are challenges like that.
My other question is, it seems to me we have a very robust school bus system here in Massachusetts. And like in our town, that school bus ridership, like there's been a lot of emphasis to move kids onto school buses. The downside I see of that, while it's great for getting people out of cars, the challenge is one, we're not getting kids to walk and bike. I'll leave that for another story. But also it can take away from youth who could be able to take public transit, So I'm wondering if you've had to deal with those conversations, or is the school conversation just separate from what you do?
Yeah, so again, in public transit, we have to be careful because we're prohibited from doing school bus, but you can do bus service that connects. Right. And so the city of York and the city of Harrisburg students do ride public transit to school. And so, that's not only is it, the whole walking, all that stuff, it's also good ridership for transit because the more means more, right? The more riders, the more stuff you can do. And if you're shrinking, then it's kind of hard to do more. So but in the borough of Hanover, which is in York County, we did a rural fixed route program. A 5311 property. We did provide transportation for students, and the school elected to go to a school bus system. And so they took the students away from the public system, moved them. It took us probably 5 years to stabilize that program. It was very detrimental. And I don't think they're totally thrilled with the program that developed and the cost associated to having their own transportation program.
Right.
So I think they're a little short-sighted in that. I don't know if they would have done something different now, but it was very disappointing. And I think if systems are starting to face that, you want to build a good relationship with the school because that's good ridership.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then last one, and I apologize if someone already asked this, but I do think it's really interesting. We were talking with folks from Pittsburgh, the Access Pittsburgh program, which seems great. I really love this idea of being able to pool the resources. So if somebody didn't already ask that, how did you go about starting to do that?
So yeah, I say she, Karen Hesh. When you say Access, I think Karen. So their program really, she's a broker as a public broker, really. So she goes out and finds a bunch of different providers. Most of the rest of the state does not have the benefit from that. When you get in the rural areas, there are no other providers. It's typically only the public transit vehicles. But we have helped companies get started. So we provide probably 75% of our own trips, but we do subcontract a portion of our shared ride program. And so, and we've used Lyft on occasion, and I think there's a role. I'm not a big TNC fan, but I do think it's one more tool in the toolbox, and we have to, but it's about the person we're serving, not the mode. Right. So we have to be mindful of that. And so we've been successful in creating and growing some of our own subcontractors.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but.
So Rich, if there's no other questions from people in the chat, I have one final one for you before we wrap up the Q&A.
Okay.
You talked a little bit about working with, they said the 5 different MPOs, correct, across We're wondering if you could talk a little bit about more about the role of the state and the federal agencies and the role they played in supporting this process.
So we are just beginning to get into the federal program because up to this point we have not merged any federal direct recipients. So CAT's a direct recipient, Rabbit's a direct recipient. So this will be the first time we're merging two of them together. So we've just begun having those conversations with FTA. I think the biggest hurdle that we're going to have there is that we just have to have PennDOT, the governor, redirect who's the recipient of the funds. So we really don't think the federal portion of this is going to be very difficult at all. So we're just going to ask the governor to designate the new transit system as the recipient of federal funds. And we think we're pretty much done at the federal level. At the state level, PennDOT gives us a lot more funding than FTA. In Pennsylvania, we're again pretty fortunate that the state is very, funds transit at a very high level. So they have a much larger role in the process. They're pretty excited about every step of the way. And they have supported us with technical assistance grants that we've used for consultants if we needed some, legal costs, technology that we purchased. They funded a lot of that. Because as we're trying to create one system, there is some cost to that. Not a lot. I think probably in 11 counties we may have had about $1 million of technical assistance grants, but we certainly offset that with the operation savings long term. And so that's kind of how that's been going. The locals don't contribute local match only for the fixed route program, so there's not a lot of resources coming from the local level.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I want to give a hearty thank you to Richard Fard for coming today and giving us this kind of wealth of information. And again, this really kind of fascinating story about how regionalization evolved and was shaped in Western Pennsylvania. So again, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us this morning.
Great. Yeah, thank you for having me.
And with that, I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Emily DeManico, to talk about some work that MPO staff has been doing in coordination with the MBTA on a application to analyze bus delay. So take it away, Emily.
Great. All right. So hi, I'm Emily, and I work in the Transit Analysis and Planning Group at CTPS. And we can move on to our next slide. Thank you. All right, so I'm here today to preview a project that we're working on with the MBTA, as Michelle just mentioned. And this project includes a study of bus delay and an interactive application to support the use of that data. On the slide in front of you is a view from the interactive app. And this app will be available on a public website where users can visualize and investigate delay across different time periods, and we're able to analyze delay across the whole bus network. So get in a little bit more to that. If we go to the next slide. Briefly, for a bit of background, back in 2016, CTPS produced a study of bus delay limited to parts of the network that had 1,500 or more daily passengers. And data inputs for the study were automatic passenger counters, or APCs, for passenger loads and INRIX road speeds for select times of the year. The primary goal of what we're doing now is to update the 2016 study with more recent data. If we go to our next slide. Since the 2016 study was completed, the MBTA has expanded APC coverage to cover pretty much the entire bus network. So in our work now, we were able to switch data sources to primarily use both APC data for passenger loads and for bus speeds. And this switch allowed us to get delay readings for the entire bus network and to pull bus speeds from a specific schedule rating. And I'll pause and say it's worth noting that this project got underway in the midst of the pandemic, when delay was not quite the same as to what it was prior. So in the app, we processed weekday bus delay from the fall 2019 rating, which spans from September to December of 2019. So it is pre-pandemic. And along the way, we've kept the processes that we've developed as flexible and reproducible as possible. so that with minimal work, we can update delay results to analyze future ratings and hopefully be responsive to the bus network as it changes. Can you go to the next slide? And in the application, we've developed multiple ways to view delay throughout the network. We have views for by route, by municipality, and by high delay corridor. And on the slide here is an example of the by municipality tab within the app that shows all day bus delay within Arlington. And on the left, there's a drop-down filter to switch between different municipal level summaries. You can also switch between different types of delay. There's median delay and 90th percentile delay for worst case scenario kind of situations. And then time periods for different slices of the day. And if we go to the next slide. Here's a quick example of the by route view. And here we can see delay across different time periods for different variations of Route 1, which is a helpful summary to get a quick glance of where problem sprouts of the route might be. And similar to the by municipality tab, there's filters on the left to sift through different routes, variations, and directions. And next slide. So I'll end with a note that this is an ongoing project that's nearing the end of its development phase. So we wanted to highlight some aspects of the work so that you know what's on the horizon. And if we have some time to have a few discussion questions, that would be helpful to keep in mind as we're nearing the end of the application design. And specifically, I'd love to hear how you all would use data on where and when buses are delayed. We've working with the transit priority group at the MBTA, so we've heard a lot about what they hope to get out of it. And I believe Wes is here if he wants to speak to that a little bit more. But you all might have some different use cases in mind and love to hear them. And in a similar vein, if the 2016 study was useful to you, I'd like to hear what elements of that study were most interesting or helpful. So happy to take questions.
Emily, I was wondering if you could speak, is this, supporting some of the efforts going on with bus network redesign, or is it kind of a general tool meant for, use by municipalities? Or I don't know if this is something that you or Wes could speak to a little bit more.
Sure, I'll let Wes jump in a second, but it is a little bit, so we are looking at historic delay. So the delay has to happen first before we detect it with the APCs. And as the bus network changes, buses could be going in different areas. So it's a little bit tangential to bus network redesign. It's not necessarily in support of it. But the hope is that it's helpful information to have about how buses move through the streets. I don't know, Wes, if you have anything more to add there. Can others hear Wes?
No, at this time, Wes, at this time we can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So sorry about that. So I just want to say thank you to the CTPS team, especially Emily, who's been sort of spearheading at helping update this. And as she mentioned, the 2016 work that CTPS had done to identify sort of passenger delay had actually like helped us at the MBTA kickstart the implementation of a lot of bus priority throughout the region. For those who don't know, it's like in the last 3 years, we've implemented about 15 miles of bus priority, which is more than doubled what we had done over the last 20 years. So, I mean, it is significant, the sort of the momentum that initial study built. And sort of what was identified as sort of the most critical areas for bus delay, we have either addressed them or in the process of addressing those. But we also realized there were some gaps in the system that we needed to think through. And so we needed more routes, but we also needed to think about there's routes where it's not just about the number of passengers, but like near the end of a bus route, there might be a lot of delay that impacts customers downstream who aren't yet on the bus in our operation. So we want to kind of get a more holistic picture, and we want to make it more interactive, easier to use. But one of the biggest parts and one of the challenges that T has is we have 50 cities and towns that we work with on a regular basis for bus priority. And we wanted to create something that was easy for them to use and at their fingertips. So anytime that a city or town is thinking about, I have this roadway project, this signal project, this sidewalk project, they have something that they can go to that's accessible to them, that they can understand sort of what is happening to the bus there, and sort of what is the delay that's incurred, and should an additional step be taken to help sort of mitigate some of those design concerns. So that was the intent of this effort, is really sort of updating the bus study work or the bus delay work that CTPS had done, and thinking through the future and how it relates to bus network redesign. I mean, this original study was done in 2016. A lot has changed since then, and we realized one snapshot in time is helpful, but we need to sort of consistently think about the future. So we're in conversations right now about, now that we've created this, can we sort of import new data on a regular basis, and how do we do that? How do we keep this updated? But the most important piece is really getting it to our partners, cities and towns, and even MassDOT and DCR, and saying, here's a resource for you to understand kind of like what's happening on your city streets with the buses there. I think as we move towards bus network redesign, we will certainly be talking about how does this tool get sort of like modified, sort of fit that new network. But additionally, like where are the areas of focus that we should have, because we know there's going to be a lot of bus routes on corridors that are out there today. So it's going to definitely help feed into those conversations that we're going to be having with cities and towns.
So we have some more questions in the chat if we have some time. The first one is, will you be reaching out to municipalities where you have noticed delays?
So we will be sharing the tool with municipal planners, and I think a little bit of that goes back to Wes and his team about how they want to approach the public participation aspect of it. But I think we are in discussion about having different sort of seminars or kind of workshops of how to use the tool that municipal planners can attend and get the most out of it and how to use the data. Another question? Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll have the chat open.
Yeah, no worries. So one question and maybe this is for Emily or Wes, are there plans to have an online current revised schedule based on anticipated delays or ABL information?
As like a real-time delay system? So I guess this looks at delay as it's experienced across an entire rating. So it is more of a summative analysis, and it's not real time. But that might be information that's hosted elsewhere. I don't know if someone has better grasp on that.
No, and I'll add too, I mean, the intent of this actually is for us planners who are kind of thinking about the future of sort of our street system. And so although it's probably going to be publicly consumable, it's really for municipal and town partners as well as MBTA, MassDOT, DCR, when we're rethinking sort of what do our roadways look like and how do we sort of address some of the challenges in our system? Not necessarily as a tool for the public to say like, where is my bus today?
Thanks for that answer. Another question that we have is, does the TEAS bus delay database have a way to separate delays caused by roadway construction versus congestion? So either manually or automatically.
So what we're doing for the delay calculation is that we're looking at the median time point of getting between two stops and the 90th percentile. So the idea is that if we take the longest it took the bus to get between 2 points, that's usually that's potentially a car crash, or that's a major diversion of the route. So we're looking at that 90th percentile. So if there's persistent construction, that would push that up across the whole rating. So we're looking from September to December for the entire fall. So it's not explicitly called out whether there's construction or not. That would be an interesting addition to add. It's kind of pre-programmed in there. If there's a route diversion, that would show up in the scheduling, and it would be accommodated that way.
Awesome, thank you, Emily. So we have a question from Lisa. Lisa, I'm gonna unmute you and you can ask your question. Sorry, just give me one second. There you go.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for this presentation. This has been so informative. Can you expand a little bit more on when planners talk about delay, sometimes there's a discrepancy with what riders might think of as a delay. if we're talking about, bus X took this long versus bus Y that took this long. But to a rider, if a bus gets rerouted because substitution and it's maybe covering for a train that's down, or a driver isn't available, so that trip gets dropped. And anything that equates in a rider's mind to my bus isn't here when I thought it would be, isn't the same as bus X being delayed, bus Y being delayed. So can you talk a little bit more how you're compiling all of that? Because it's data in totally different kinds of formats, but it's incredibly important if the goal is to get more people to ride the bus.
Yeah,
which I do every day. So thank you for having buses, by the way.
No, it's a good question, and I'd highlight that our units for delay here are passenger hours per mile. So the delay is scaled not just by like amount of time that it takes for the bus to get to a place as compared to when it could do it the fastest, but we're scaling that by the amount of passengers that are experiencing that delay. So that's where the load is important. So if there's 50 people on the bus and the bus is going 10 seconds slower than it would in its fastest mode, like usually when it's at the middle, during the middle of the night when there's no one on the roads to delay it. So we're comparing that time point from that 50 seconds to maybe it's 30 seconds, and then multiplying that by the total load of people on the bus, so the people impacted by that delay and experiencing it. So that's where we get the passenger hours per mile, and the length of the segment is normalized there. So it is a little bit different than my bus is 3 minutes late. It's looking at the amount of time that it takes the bus to get from point A to point B compared to when it does it the fastest, which, as I said, usually in the middle of the night. So the idea is that we're hopefully looking at a realistic travel time for the bus by comparing it to that fastest speed and saying that that delay is that difference in time scaled by the amount of people impacting that delay. And as what's mentioned before, you can get a little bit creative with thinking about how that delay is experienced by people. You can look at downstream effects of all of the passengers impacted by the delay, not just the passengers on board for the segment, but all of the passengers on the route that would experience a delay. So there's other ways of framing it that are definitely different than my bus is 1 minute late. So important thing to highlight.
And if I can add, I think the point around drop trips is like an interesting one, but I think the reason that's not included is kind of like bifurcating, like the purpose of this tool is like help as we think about planning for our city streets and our city and town streets and what we can do out there to improve bus service. Drop trips in and of itself is almost entirely a function of sort of MBTA internal operations. So on our end internally, what we're trying to do is like modernize the way we're tracking drop trips, trying to get to the root cause of them, better manage the system, and also trying to like build up our capacity to provide the service that we need to provide and build sort of what we call a cover list, which is like backup drivers, so that if someone calls out sick or a trip gets diverted, we can still fulfill that trip that's on the schedule. So some of those challenges we have internally that we're trying to address, but that's not really part of like this tool, the intent of this tool, which is to sort of help people understand the delay that's happening on their streets, kind of like advise them sort of about street network design.
So I'd love to go back to some of Emily's discussion questions. Nat, would you take us back one slide? So I just want to reiterate what Emily asked. I mean, would anyone like to share how you would use this data on where and where buses are most delayed? And if you use information from the previous study in 2016, which we also shared in the chat, what elements of the study were most interesting or helpful?
We can also provide, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You go, Michelle.
I was just going to say we can provide Emily's email in the chat. So if you have feedback that comes to mind after you're looking at some of the previous materials or giving the questions some more thought, we can definitely provide information about how to contact her. We can also, as the tool continues to develop, we can share more information about its availability, through our regular transit working group and other MPO meeting lists. So if there are no other questions at this time, we can move ahead into giving proper opportunity for anyone who wants to make public comments about things that they heard today and didn't get a chance to ask about earlier. Again, feel free to put something in the chat or raise your hand. And we'll give people a minute to do that. And as I'm not seeing anything else, we can move ahead just to some closing remarks. So next slide, please, Matt. Oh, I just saw a question from Susan. Go ahead.
One sec. Okay. Sorry, it wasn't really a question. You asked if I wanted to share about the regionalization plan that we're working on. So I'll just give that note there for anyone unfamiliar with it. So the town of Lexington was awarded a grant from MassDOT through the Community Transportation Grant Program to work on a mobility management project. And one of the aspects of that is a regionalization action plan, because we've had studies and we've talked for years about the need to regionalize, but getting down to the actual work to make that happen is what's been the challenge. So our hope with this is that we can actually come up with some reasonable plans to make that a possibility. So we've been working with our consultants. We're hoping this project can wrap up by late fall, early winter, at least with a plan. And our next step is, our consultants are going to be attending our regional coordinating council meeting, which I see many of the people on this call attend that. So that'll be next Tuesday. And if anyone has questions, feel free to send me something in the chat or talk to me some other time. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. It's been kind of really exciting to learn about that project thus far, and I can't wait to see how it progresses. We also have a question from Lisa Weber, who asked, there was a point where the MBTA committed to increasing the amount of dispatchers to deal with real-time issues that arise, no matter how much street redesign there is. Is that still happening? I personally don't have any information to respond to that. I don't know if there's anyone on the call who could speak to that question. If so, please raise your hand or respond in the chat. And Lisa, if you'd like to give a little more context by raising your hand, feel free to do that as well.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I think that was part of the original Better Bus project, where part of, and I know there's been a whole bunch of those presentations. I apologize, I don't remember which one of those, but there was talk of increasing the amount of dispatchers. I want to say it was 40 individuals that were supposed to be hired to deal with those real-time issues that are going to happen just no matter what. So to help with bus bunching, to help with any kinds of accommodations, and I just wasn't sure. I know that the T just said they're hiring 60 more drivers, but I wasn't sure where the dispatcher conversation happened or if that's been put on hold for the new bus network redesign. Thank you.
Unfortunately, I don't know if we have anyone from the T to speak to that area today, but that's something that we can hopefully gather some information on going forward. So if there are no other public comments, I'll just say a few words about closeout. As I mentioned, there will be a post-meeting email that'll have the links that came up in the chat and some of the presentations today. We also have a post-meeting feedback survey that if you can fill that out, that would be fantastic. We'll put a link to that in the chat today. And we will send that out in the follow-up email as well. This recording will be posted on the MPO's YouTube page and eventually on the MPO's Pilot Transit Working Group webpage as well. This will help the hopefully folks who had some connectivity issues with the storm today catch up on parts that they may have missed. And we will keep you posted about upcoming meetings for the Transit Working Group. As I mentioned at the outset, these are quarterly, so we will probably be having the next one in September or October. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation today, we will be probably resuming those Transit Working Group chats sometime after that fall meeting. And thanks, Kate, for putting the survey in the chat. And we'll just bring MPO staff's contact information up. That's on the next slide. And again, we'll be sharing contact information for folks that were presenting today in the follow-up email. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today and hope you have a great weekend.